Not a lot, but it has a little bit. And it has a related stimulant called theobromine. Theobromine, any of you who have dogs and the vet said, don't give chocolate to your dog? It's because of theobromine. It can kill dogs. It's a powerful stimulant as far as they're concerned. And there's much, much more of it than there is caffeine in chocolate. There's also another amphetamine-like chemical called phenylethylamine. And eating chocolate slows the breakdown of a chemical called anandamide in the brain, which is the same chemical that mediates the effect of marijuana on the brain. Now, I don't mean to say that chocolate is a drug. What I mean to say is it's the whole darn drugstore, all inside one wrapper. Okay, but it's not the only addiction. In a research study we recently did, 59 postmenopausal women went on a totally vegan diet for 14 weeks. And after 14 weeks, I asked them, what are you missing now? They didn't have any meat, they didn't have any dairy, they didn't have any eggs. We kept vegetable oils very, very low. And when we asked them, what do you really miss? They didn't miss ice cream, especially. They didn't miss a cold glass of milk with Oreos. What they really missed more than anything else, surprisingly enough, was cheese. Have you noticed that when people go vegan, for some reason, cheese kind of lingers on in their mind? They wake up about 4:30 in the morning dreaming of cheese pizza with those melty strings coming down. Well, I wondered what this is about, and this is what actually set me on this mission of trying to understand why is cheese addicting. And the first thing I discovered is back in 1981, a researcher named Eli Haslam at the Wellcome Research Laboratories in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, found a substance that looked very much like morphine in cow's milk. Now, there wasn't a lot of it, but they did a lot of tests and found out eventually that it didn't just look like morphine, it actually was morphine. Cows have, you know just how poppy flowers, they have the enzymes that make opiates, opium, you've heard of opium poppies. Well, cows also have enzymes in their liver that make morphine and also make codeine. And tiny bits of these narcotics will end up in milk more in the spring than the fall. It's intermittent, and it's not a lot, and it's probably not the reason why milk products have a little bit more sway over people. What seems to be more important is something called casomorphins. Have you heard of casein? Casein, C-A-S-E-I-N. Casein is the primary milk protein. It's a long string. All proteins are strings of beads. Each bead is an amino acid. And when you digest proteins in your digestive tract, your enzymes snip them into individual beads. Each of these individual amino acids goes into your bloodstream and helps you to build body tissue. Except that when you ingest casein, it doesn't break apart into individual amino acids. It breaks into strings of 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 amino acids. These little chains have drug-like effects, and they're called casomorphins, casein-derived morphine-like compounds. They act like opiates, they act like narcotics, and the most powerful of them has about 1/10 the opiate effect of morphine. Now, it's not enough that, don't get me wrong, you're not going to drive funny. You know, you're not going to go out on a street corner offering people Velveeta. But what you will experience, people who do a lot of cheese, they very often get constipated, which happens to be exactly the same thing that happens if you've ever been in the hospital for an operation and they gave you Demerol or any other narcotic. One of the principal reasons people don't like those is they get very constipated and bound up. It's the opiate effect on the intestinal lining itself. Now, there are a variety of these, and researchers have been teasing them apart. The dairy industry has been aware of them for 20 years or more, but I would hazard a guess that not one person in this room has ever heard of these opiate-like substances that are in dairy products. Now, why cheese? When I take milk and convert it to cheese, what I'm doing is I add something to curdle the solids so that they lump together, and I squeeze out all the water, all the lactose, all the whey proteins, which go along with the water, and I'm left with pure casein and fat. So cheese is potentially the most addicting form of the substance. I think we're onto something here. Now, to show you how peculiar things have gotten, back in the 1980s, researchers discovered that human breast milk has casein also. Not as much as in cow's milk, but there's some there. And in some women, after they've given birth, their own breast milk releases little bits of casein into their own blood. I'm not talking about milk that she's drinking. I'm talking about her own breast milk. It gets into her blood, breaking apart into casomorphins. And occasionally, in some women, the concentration of these casomorphins gets very, very, very high. They get a toxic effect in their brain where they become psychotic. What I'm suggesting here is that postpartum psychosis, which isn't very common, but it does occur. I'm suggesting that it is not due to the burdens of raising a child. It's not due to sleeplessness and the pain of childbirth. What I'm suggesting is a toxic effect in the brain from the same sort of chemical that people who are ingesting dairy products every day might experience as well, albeit to a dramatically different degree. Are you with me? Is this making some sense? Okay. So where are we? We're not at the end of our journey. We're at the beginning. We've just thrown open the door to understanding why is it that I like an apple but I'm not hooked on it. After a workout or it's a hot day, we love a juicy apple, some oranges, a bowl of cherries, a banana. These are delicious things, but they aren't things that we tend to binge on. We don't go crazy for them. But on the other hand, sugar we do. Chocolate we do. Cheese we do. If we imagine that there isn't a drug-like effect on our brains, we're really denying ourselves the reality. So where we are with casomorphins, though, we don't know to the extent to which they're absorbed from the digestive tract into the bloodstream and to the brain. We know that in a calf, the casomorphins form in the digestive tract. They do get into the blood, and they go to the infant's brain. We know that in a human baby, same story. The human baby who breastfeeds feels nourished, looks happy and content, and falls asleep. And we thought it was our lullabies and cooing that was doing that. Well, it actually is a drug-like effect from the mother's milk itself. We're now looking at the extent to which this happens in adults. Well, do we want to break the cheese seduction? Well, let's look at some numbers. Calorie content, this is just 2 ounces. This is just one single sandwich. Fair amount of calories, 190 for brie, 228 for cheddar. The fat content is worrisome in itself, and it's mostly bad fat. It's mostly the saturated fat that causes our cholesterol levels to rise. The cholesterol content itself, this is just 1 ounce, is as high as a steak, ounce per ounce. So when people get stuck at the cheese phase of vegetarianism, they're not doing nearly as well for themselves as when they break free and get to the foods at the bottom of this list, beans and grains and vegetables and fruits, which have 0 cholesterol, very, very little fat. Okay, now for many folks, what really convinces them that breaking the cheese seduction is a good idea is that they had some arthritis. And have any of you experienced this? That you had what you thought for all the world was classic rheumatoid arthritis. But when you changed your diet, something happened you didn't expect. Did any of you have experienced this? You find your joints lighten up. In some cases, it goes away completely, but then you drift away from your diet, your joints start grinding again. It turns out that not in every case, but in many cases, foods are the trigger, and dairy products, of all the triggers, dairy products is the most common. It's not the fat, it's the protein that we're reacting to. Migraines, same story. If any of you have had migraines, is this not true? That certain foods will trigger it, and cheese is one of the most common? Digestive problems, very, very common. I've seen so many people who thought they had irritable bowel syndrome that they were going to have it for the rest of their life. When they got away from dairy, they were much better. Perhaps the thing that has concerned me the most is prostate cancer. Have you seen this research suggesting that milk-drinking men are at a higher risk of prostate cancer? Hormone effects from milk seem to trigger this process. If we look at countries that are further on the right of this slide, those countries that consume a lot of milk, as you can see, there's a lot of variability, but they tend to have a higher rate of prostate cancer.